Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of a bonus episode of the Pazza Podcast, our special player profile episodes, which has really become one of my favorite things to record. Really gives me an opportunity to look back and remember some of the players that really shaped my love for Italian football, mainly that meat of the 2000s Serie A action from '05 through 2010, 2011. That was some real formidable years for me as far as falling in love with Italian culture, football, everything about it. I've had a couple great episodes, in my opinion, so far. One detailing, or the initial one, detailing the career of Rodrigo Tade, the Brazilian Roma, best known for playing for Roma, winger, left back, Swiss Army knife type of player, as well as Massimo Maccarone, the striker also known as Big Mac, went to Middlesbrough for a Premier League, best remembered with his time with Empoli and Siena in Serie A. And this week we're going to do Davide Biondini, or also known as Bambino di colore fuori, or the kid of fire color, fire hair. You wouldn't be able to miss him when you watch the Cagliari match during this time because he was the first and maybe only redheaded Italian I'd ever seen, either on the pitch or off. Really stark contrast from the rest of his Italian counterparts. He stuck out like a sore thumb on the field, but he had some seasons where he stuck out not only for his appearance on the field, but also his performance. Really special player, but an even more special person, Davide Biondini. We'll dive a little deep into this guy. Really a memorable player for me, in my opinion, and an icon of that, for me, Serie A time during that period I was talking about. Um, he's a midfielder, best known for his time with Cagliari, Genoa, and then also a little run towards the end of his career with Sassuolo. My first memory was him at Cagliari, like I said, seeing that red hair on the pitch. He's played under Davide Ballardini at that point for Cagliari. I'd never seen a redheaded Italian before, but every time I'd watch more Serie A action, this was back in the era of Fox Soccer Channel if you were a Serie A fan. So you really got two, maybe three matches a weekend. Didn't get to really see a lot of Cagliari, but whenever you did, it was either against a Milan, an Inter, or a Juventus, the big three. So you would definitely flip on in any game Cagliari played against those three. You would notice him, and he was a decent player during his run too. He was born on the 24th of January, 1983, in a town called Montiano in Italy, which is it's just a small town, population under 1,600 people. It's in the Forli Cesena province of the Emilio, Emilia Romagna region of Italy, northern Italy. Uh, Montiano is almost on the coast of Italy. It's not too far. It's just outside of the city of Cesena. Uh, no other person of note is from that city other than a sibling of Biondini, which we'll mention a little later. Began his youth career at Cesena in the year of 2000 at age 17. They were suffering a down period at this point after 7 years in Serie B, a down point relatively at that point for them. They'd been 7 years in Serie B from 91 to 97, and then they bounced around before that from 73 to 91 from Serie A to Serie B, spending a few years in each, bouncing around. So, not a huge squad, but a team that bounced around in Serie A a couple times and a constant Serie B team. But at this point, they're in Serie C. He was promoted to the senior squad in 2001. He played 45 times, scoring 2 goals in this 2 seasons. He kind of played at top flight 2.5 seasons football for Cesena, which, due to the success of playing there in 2004, he made the move to Vicenza, who were a Serie B side at that time, Cesena was still in Serie C. And this was in a co-ownership deal, which you don't see anymore, but was big in Italy in the mid 2000s to probably the mid 2015s, and I think it's outlawed now. In a co-ownership deal, 2005, Vicenza, they bought him outright, and he played 62 games there with 2 goals for the club. In August of 2005, Regina also purchased Biondini, but in another co-ownership deal, and this was his move to Serie A. He played 1 season there, making 28 appearances for the club in the 05-06 season. But Regina was also involved in the Calciopoli scandal, the more famously, really, Juventus was the one at the center of that scandal of the 2005-2006, which rocked Italian football. After what originally was a 15-point deduction, only received an 11-point deduction from the FIGC and was able to still keep in safety in Serie A. They weren't relegated. Uh, but due to the Calciopoli scandal, it was more than likely the reason that forced his loan with option to buy to Cagliari in August of 2006. And this is when he's most remembered for me, is his time at Cagliari from 2006 to 2012. He'd make 161 appearances for the club. So you got to think that's 6 seasons. They don't play at any other competitions hardly, maybe Coppa Italia at some point, like a game or two. So he's averaging in that 6 seasons roughly about 30 appearances. He's a pretty well stalwart midfielder for that Cagliari time during that period. He'd play under some big managers under his time in Cagliari, such as Marco Giampaolo, former Milan manager about 5, 6, 7 years ago. He's currently the manager at Lecce. The aforementioned Davide Biondini. He's the former Lazio, Genoa, Bologna, and Sassuolo manager. Roberto Donadoni was a Cagliari manager. And then the most successful spell for Cagliari, really in a long time, and Biondini's best season, and really catapulted this manager to the forefront. Max Allegri was the 08-09 season. Played along some great players in his first season, such as Davide Suazo. The Honduran also moved to Inter. Mauro Esposito, Cagliari legend Daniele Conti. If you remember him, had the long hair. Not related to Antonio Conte, but Daniele Conti. Long hair. Played a lot of games for Cagliari. Really important to the club. First season he played with Simone Pepe, the Juve player, played for the Italian national team. And then also Alessandro Agostini. He's another Cagliari legend. His left back was there for their first season. They were generally a bottom half Serie A side, but this changed in that 08-09 season, like I mentioned, under Allegri. They had players this season, which are players you all, if you followed Serie A at some point in the last 10 years or so, remember, but they had a really good squad. They had Federico Marchetti in goalkeeper, Italian international, really good keeper. They had Diego Lopez, the Uruguayan, in center back. Unfortunately, the deceased, but great center back, Fiorentina player, formerly also Davide Astori, center back, Cagliari legend, RIP. I remember that day whenever he passed. Astori, really great player. Conti, like I mentioned earlier, Biondini, Andrea Lazzari, and Andrea Kosu. They had the forwards, Jeda, the Brazilian. Uh, if you remember, former Inter player, really 08-09 season, he burst out on the scene, was linked to Inter. It seemed like every week there were tabloids. Roberto Acquafresca, really great name. Really only like a half a season wonder. He had that half a season and was just great. Bad goals, tall player, scored some decently skilled goals as well. And a very similar player also was in the squad to Acquafresca. Going to be a Milan player in the future and Juventus and Italy international Alessandro Matri. Kind of very similar player to Acquafresca, tall, somewhat skilled. makes some moves, does his work around goal as well. They finished ninth place with 53 points, top half finish for Cagliari, which was huge. 3 points above 10th place Lazio, only 5 points below seventh place, and huge Colt Serie A favorite team of all time, Udinese, the team that had Alexis Sanchez, Di Natale, Isla, Gökhan Inler, Handanovic, just to name a few. There's only 5 points behind them. They beat Inter at home, Napoli at home. They beat Lazio and Juventus away. A note about the season, they were unbeaten against Inter that season. They had a win and a draw. Not many teams could say that, but Cagliari could that season. So a really successful season for them. It seemed like as far as at that time, 08, 09. But when you're that successful as a small side like Cagliari, it is going to lead to sales, player sales. Max Allegri left for greener pastures, Milan, and they ended up going back to the bottom half of the table for the next 3 years, which the rest of Davide Biondini's career at Cagliari. But he was always in the squad, averaging, like I said, 30-point matches a season. Really instrumental in there, hardworking, combative center midfielder. When you saw the team sheet, you knew he was going to be in and week out under Allegri. And he was solid but unspectacular. He knew his role. A very modern midfielder, I would say. Robotic almost to the point where he knew what he had to do and did it well and worked hard for the team, did what the manager asked of him. Um, and had a great stint with Cagliari, 6, 7 seasons through there. For Cagliari's success of being in ninth place is huge for them. Only a couple points back from potentially being in Europa League. It was a pretty successful year for the Sardinian side, which doesn't seem big for a lot of other clubs, but for a side from Sardinia like that, it's massive. It's huge. They've won Serie A once in their entirety of being a club, and they honor the players that played on that team like gods. So ninth place was nothing to know gripe at for them, and he made 161 appearances for the club. But he was there for a long time. It was a really good player for the club and a really good move for both sides. But January 2012, he had left on a free transfer to Genoa. Played there for the next 2 years, where he was on the books for the next 2 years in Genoa. He did go on a loan to Atalanta for the 2012-2013 season. So really played only 2 6-month spells for Genoa. Um, in those 2 years between Genoa and Atalanta, he made 60 appearances and had one goal before he moved to Sassuolo. Initially a 6-month loan as a January transfer, but they made permanent that summer. And we're going to talk about cult teams. This Neroverdi Sassuolo run of teams that he was on, my God. If you're a love these days and love cult Serie A teams, some of these names I'm about to throw out is really going to get you going. It did when I was looking at them. It so memorable. It was a great run of Sassuolo teams, in my opinion. And Biondini was on that squad. He wasn't at that point every game midfielder, but he was a good rotational midfielder that averages about 20 matches a year for the club, which was awesome. And but yeah, let me go through these names and you'll really love them. Uh, in goal for Sassuolo, which seems for he's been there forever. Andrea Consigli. He's still there, long hair. I think he's one of the oldest goalkeepers now, probably still around. Got to be like 37, 38. Still kept some clean sheets. And that last season of Serie A, I think he'd kind of fallen behind at that point last year. But Consigli, big name, goalkeeper. These defenders, Alessandro Longhi. Here's one that I completely forgot played for Sassuolo. Sime Vrsaljko, the Croatian who played for Inter for a little bit, more famously known for his time at Atletico Madrid. He was there. Francesco Acerbi played for Inter, still plays for Inter. Huge name. Federico Peluzzo and a name that I completely forgot about and only really remembered him. I thought of or would have remembered him for his time at Napoli, but now I remember him playing for Sassuolo. Brother's a legend, brother Fabio, but we got Paolo Cannavaro, and we had some great midfielders who played alongside Biondini, Simone Miseroli, who was still there a couple years ago. I don't think he's with them anymore. He had the Algerian, who was a huge flop at Inter, Safir Taider, Serie A journeyman Matteo Brighi, and Sassuolo legend Francesco Magnanelli. Dude was played for Sassuolo for so long. Great name as far as Serie A goes. You also had another cult legend, Domenico Berardi, playing in the forward line. Nicola Sansone, who never really reached his promise and potential. Antonio Flores, great name there. Sergio Fraccari, another great name if you follow Serie A for a long time. And then, of course, the famous Simone Zaza. I mean, just these names bring up so much feeling and nostalgia if you're a Serie A fan. But he had a successful spell for the club. They finished as high as sixth place in the 2015-2016 season under Eusebio Di Francesco. Had a couple of round of 16 appearances in the Copa and had a Europa League appearance in 2016-2017 because of that 2015-2016 season. Uh, he mainly, like I said, was a rotational center mid at this point, averages about 20 or so appearances in the 4 years with the club, 20 or so appearances per year. But during his time as well, he played alongside of midfielders like Lorenzo Pellegrini with Roma now, Stefano Sensi, played for Inter, really known for his time there. Had a great 6 month run. Now he plays for Monza, just can't stay healthy. Maybe a future one of these bonus episode profile people, Alberto Aquilani, maybe. Alfred Duncan, Matteo Politano, plays for Napoli now. And then Gregoire Devrel, the French player, all played alongside of Biondini, or he played alongside them. And at that point, Sassuolo during this run could have easily become what we know as Atalanta now. They had a decent run at a point where it was like they could be, who is the next team challenging these people. Fortunately, they're a selling club. I mean, Atalanta is too, but Sassuolo didn't do as great of a job eventually finding more talent. And it kind of bit them in the butt now being a Serie B squad. But it's that was his time at Sassuolo. Pretty successful. To end his career, and it's one of the coolest things, and you really start to learn about who the man Davide Biondini was at the end of his playing career and after his playing career. But one of the coolest things about him is that before he retired, he could have retired when his contract at Sassuolo was over, but he returned to his boyhood club, Cesena. They were renamed the Cesena Football Club due to they went bankrupt in 2018, and when they finally got back and stable, the image rights to AC Cesena had already been bought, and so they had to change their name. And this was only a couple months after. But Biondini returned back and helped them regain professional status. At this point, they're in Serie D, semi-professional Italian top flight for semi-professional. But in the first season, they won the championship to regain professional status. They had been in professional football city or the Italian professional football for 78 years. So this was huge for the town and club for him to come back, a Serie A player just the year before, come back to Serie D and help them regain professional status. Well done, Davide. Bravo. Really just shows or starts to show the type of man he was. Note before we talk about what he's doing now, did make two appearances for Italy in 2009. That season under Allegri really shows his quality, I think. He's made two appearances for the Azzurri, but you could argue, I mean, that was a kind of a dark period for the Azzurri. If you remember what happened in the 2010 World Cup after that, didn't make it out of the groups. Uh, so even though, that's a big deal, two appearances for the national team, like I said, I think he was deserved, but some people could make the argument it was a dark period for Italy. Nowadays, Biondini, he is the vice president for the Italian Players Association. And if you look on his Instagram, one of the best labels I've ever seen for somebody. He's the consigliere federale to the FIGC. What a label. Pretty much he's a big advisor to the FIGC, pretty like a liaison uh, from the players to the FIGC. So pretty cool. He's helping out the players uh, more so than being kind of a corrupt politician like you've seen some other players do after Michel Platini. Wonder what club he came from. Uh, but some things in an interview with FIFA Pro, you really get to see what type of man he is. He mentions two projects that he's done as his time as vice president and consigliere to FIGC. What he mentioned was organizing some former players to go to refugee camps in Lebanon and play against refugees, and also teaching imprisoned youth how to reintegrate and socialize back into society through sport, mainly football. So essentially, just going into prisons before kids are being released and through sport, trying to help them improve communication and teamwork and abilities. Really cool stuff by Biondini here. Shows kind of, again, like the man he is. Seems like a really good person. And he mentioned how really focused he is at helping players through, you know, lessening player workload, uh, communication from the union to the players, and just raising awareness, trying to harp on the importance of mental health to these players. Really seems to have the players and other people in mind over himself. Seems like an all around great guy. And one thing to mention as well, he does have a brother who is an executive chef in Australia somewhere, and he's also the second Italian redhead I've ever seen in my life. So the Biondini's, redheaded people of Italy. I wonder if that's a thing in Cesena. If you know, comment please. I think his legacy will be an all around, just known as a good player, but an even better person, it seems like. He had a solid but unspectacular career. He was very combative there in the midfield, and he'll be just remembered for his passion, his red hair, but I think maybe even more his post career moves as union head and kind of liaison to the players. Just seems like a really awesome guy. So if you guys remember Biondini, give me a like. If there's anybody you want to hear me do a deep dive on, please recommend. Like I said, I've got some other players in mind that I'm probably going to do, but I'm always forgetting people or finding other players, and I'm like, oh, I need to add this to the list. So if you guys love Serie A from this time, comment, give me some people to do. It's a fun one for me. I love looking these people up, but thank you guys so much. Please like, subscribe, let me know what I need to improve on, and as always, Forza Inter.